Ever get that feeling? You know, that pull towards the water? Like, you just got to see what's beyond the shore.
I know exactly what you mean.
Well, today we're going deep on Paddle Tales Adventures on the Water. It's a podcast idea all about bringing those water adventures to life.
It's pretty amazing how paddling, something so basic, can connect us back to the water, you know, like a primal human thing.
Yeah, it's definitely more than just knowing how to paddle.
Exactly. These stories, they're about adventure and challenge.
Our relationship with nature.
Right?
And Paddle Tales wants to capture all that.
All the stories from the paddling community.
It's all right here in this source material.
Hey.
Ideas for episodes from calm explorations.
Do like crazy whitewater.
And even those uh-oh moments we've all had.
Oh, yeah, I've had a few of those.
Haven't we all?
Yeah.
But what I find really cool is how they want to structure these episodes.
Oh, yeah. How so?
They start by, like, immersing you in the environment, using ambient sounds and stuff.
So like gentle water sounds.
Uh-huh. Bird calls, maybe even the rush of a river.
Wow. It'd be like you're right there in the kayak.
With the storyteller, yeah.
Yeah.
About to go on the adventure with them, then they dive into the story itself.
So a personal story from a paddler, or maybe an interview with someone, like an expert.
Yeah, someone with a unique perspective. And it's not just about what happened.
It's about the feeling, right?
Exactly. How did it feel to paddle through that fog? What was it like conquering that rapid?
That's where you really connect.
Totally. And I love that they're adding a paddle fails and wins segment.
Everyone loves a good mishap story, right?
Especially on the water. Makes you feel like you're not alone.
Yeah.
But wouldn't focusing on the fails scare off new paddlers?
That's a good point. It's got to be balanced, right?
Yeah.
The fails are funny and build community, but the wins are important too. Show the joy of being out there.
For sure. Now, some of these story themes have me hooked already. Serene explorations, for one.
That sounds peaceful.
Right. They suggest an episode about paddling through mangroves at sunrise. Maybe even seeing some otters.
Oh, wow. I'd love that.
Right. Who wouldn't? It's like tapping into that need to connect with nature. Finding peace in our crazy lives.
Almost meditative, yeah.
Then you've got adrenaline-pumping whitewater. Totally different vibe.
A little more intense.
They mention an episode about a paddler's first time down a Class V rapid.
Oh, I can imagine the adrenaline. Heart pounding, a little fear, maybe?
But it's not just about the thrill.
It's about skill and preparation, respect for nature's power.
True. For listeners new to whitewater, explaining the rapid classifications might help.
Oh, good idea. Like how Class On is calm and Class 6 is, well, pretty much impossible.
Exactly. A little technical info can add a lot. So we've got peaceful explorations in intense whitewater. What's next?
How about wildlife encounters?
Yeah.
Those moments that show you're not alone out there? They suggest an episode about a canoeist camping with moose and loons.
Wow. Just picturing that gives me chills.
Beautiful, right?
Speaking of chills, they also have an episode about a kayaker's close call with a bear.
Oh, my. I bet that falls under survival stories.
Right. Those stories are gripping because they remind us how unpredictable water can be.
You gotta be prepared. Think fast. But they also show how resilient we are, what we can handle when things get tough.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Right.
Exactly. But hopefully those paddle fails and wins can help listeners avoid those situations altogether. What kind of fails are they thinking of featuring?
Well, they mention everything from the funny, like someone mistaking a log for a crocodile, to the more serious stuff. Gear failures, getting lost, things like that.
But even the serious ones can teach us something, right?
Definitely. It's all about learning from each other. And maybe having a good laugh, too.
Exactly. Now, I'm curious about the cultural and historical journeys theme. They suggest an episode about paddling the Hudson River, retracing routes used by indigenous peoples.
Oh, wow. That'd be amazing.
Like paddling through time, right? Seeing those waterways from a different perspective.
It adds a whole new layer to the adventure and makes you realize paddling isn't just for fun.
Yeah, it's connected to history and culture. Speaking of connections, there's group adventures and bonds. It's about how paddling brings people together.
It does, doesn't it?
Like that episode about a paddling club trip, where strangers become lifelong friends.
Shared challenges and wins, especially on the water, that builds strong bonds.
You need teamwork, communication, and trust.
Absolutely. And those things can last way beyond the trip itself.
It's like a mini version of life.
Yeah.
You know, facing obstacles, working together, celebrating as a team.
And let's be real, those group trips probably have the best paddle fail stories.
Oh, definitely. Sharing a laugh with your buddies after a mishap, it's all part of the fun.
Yeah.
What I really like is how they're making Paddle Tales interactive to get listeners involved.
Yeah, building a community.
They want listeners to send in their own paddle fails and wins. What do you think about that?
I think it's brilliant. It makes listeners part of the show. It's not just listening anymore, it's a conversation.
Right. They even suggest sending in audio clips or videos, like of your own paddling trips.
Imagine that. It'd be like a virtual paddling club.
People sharing their experiences, connecting with others who love the water. So what are your thoughts on those sample episode titles they have?
They're really catchy. Dancing with Dolphins, a magical paddle across Monterey Bay. That one makes you feel the wonder right away.
I love that one. What about Flipped and Fearless? Lessons from my first whitewater adventure.
That's great. Uses humor to draw you in, and it feels personal.
My favorite is The Crocodile That Wasn't. Hilarious paddle fails.
Oh, that's good. Playful, relatable. You know it'll be a good laugh.
Ah,
Though focusing on the lessons learned from those fails, not just the humor, could make it even better.
you're right. It's about finding that balance. Entertainment and education.
Exactly. Keep it fun, but give listeners something they can learn from and use in their own paddling.
Right. And that's what makes Paddle Tales so cool. It's about that connection we have with water.
Sharing the stories that make those experiences so memorable.
Whether it's a calm paddle or a wild ride down a river, every stroke can lead to something new.
A discovery, a connection, an adventure.
Now, they don't say this directly, but I wonder if they'll talk about different types of paddling and the skills you need for each one.
Interesting point. They mention whitewater, but there's sea kayaking, stand-up paddle boarding, canoeing, even kayak fishing.
So many options, each one with its own challenges and rewards.
Yeah, for a new paddler, a quick overview of those could be helpful.
They might discover a type of paddling they never knew about, and maybe even try it themselves.
And if they're in the Motor City area, they're in for a treat.
What do you mean?
Well, the Motor City Paddle Club has kayak rentals at Weber Paddle Park on the Salt River.
That's awesome. A beautiful place to try out paddling.
Absolutely.
Anyone can check out their website, www.motorcitypaddleclub.com, to learn more about rentals and plan their next adventure. But let's get back to the source material.
Right. They talk about how each episode of Paddle Tales should be structured, and it's worth looking at that more closely.
I agree. The structure is key to telling these stories effectively. So how do they picture each episode going? Walk me through it.
Well, they want to grab the listener's attention right away, make them feel like they're right there on the water.
Experiencing it with a storyteller.
Yeah, and they do that with sound.
Oh, you mean those ambient sounds? The waves, the birds, the river.
Exactly. Those sounds set the scene, create the mood. Whether it's peaceful or exciting, those opening moments really pull you into the story.
It's like you're transported to a different world just through sound. And then they get into the main story or interview.
Right, and that's where the real magic is. We hear directly from the people who lived these adventures.
We experience their wins and losses, the awe-inspiring moments, the funny mishaps, all in their own words.
And it's not just listing what happened, it's about the emotions behind it.
Like, how did it feel to paddle through thick fog, not knowing where you were going, or conquering a tough rapid and coming out on top?
Those are the things that make these stories relatable.
And inspiring. Don't forget the paddle fails and wins segment.
Of course, that's where listeners share their stories and connect with the paddling community.
It's so important to the show, building that sense of shared experience.
Absolutely. But I wonder, how much time will they give to this segment in each episode? They don't say exactly, but they do emphasize it's a big part of the show. They suggest having people call in live or playing pre-recorded submissions.
So they're open to trying different things.
It sounds like it.
That's great. They're really thinking about how to keep the show engaging. But let's not forget those amazing episode ideas they have. I'm still thinking about that Wildlife Wonders episode. Imagine hearing about encounters with dolphins, whales, otters, even a bear or two.
That episode would appeal to everyone, paddlers and anyone who loves nature. And for those who like a little more excitement, there's Stormy Seas, stories from paddlers who faced some intense weather.
That's got to be intense.
Gripping storytelling for sure.
And bucket list adventures. Stories about paddling in amazing locations. I'd love to hear about paddling with penguins in Antarctica.
The possibilities are endless, right? That's what's so exciting about Paddle Tales. It can take listeners to incredible places, introduce them to fascinating people, and inspire them to have their own adventures.
Like a passport to paddling adventures, all from your headphones. And it reminds us that adventure isn't always about traveling far.
Sometimes the best experiences are right in our own backyard.
Exactly. Which is why the Motor City Paddle Club is such a great resource for people in the Detroit area.
Absolutely. Whether you're a seasoned paddler or just starting out, they offer a fantastic way to experience paddling on the beautiful Salt River.
And with kayak rentals at Weber Paddle Park, it's easy to get out on the water and start making your own paddle tails.
Exactly.
Speaking of making your own paddle tails, I'm curious about how the podcast plans to involve listeners and make them feel like part of the conversation.
Well, besides the paddle fails and wins segment, they also suggest things like listener polls, where people vote on their favorite paddling spots or share opinions.
That's a good way to keep people engaged, and I love the idea of those audio clip submissions. Listeners sending in recordings of their own paddling adventures.
Like a virtual campfire, right?
Exactly. Everyone sharing their stories, connecting through their shared love of paddling.
I can almost hear it now. The crackling fire, the gentle water sounds, and the voices of paddlers from all over sharing their adventures.
It would be amazing. And those interactive elements break down the wall between the podcast and the listener, creating that sense of community, that shared adventure.
And it all circles back to that core message, celebrating the connection between us, the water, and adventure. Whether it's a peaceful paddle or a thrilling ride, Paddle Tales reminds us that every stroke can lead to something special.
So as we wrap up our look at the paddle tails concept, I'm left with one question. What kind of story will you share with the paddling community? Will it be one of serene exploration?
Or an adrenaline-pumping whitewater adventure.
Maybe a heartwarming encounter with wildlife?
Or a hilarious mishap that reminds us to not take ourselves too seriously.
Whatever your story is, get out there, answer that call of the water, and experience those moments of connection and adventure. Create your own paddle tales worth sharing.
Who knows? Maybe one day we'll be sharing it right here.
And if you're in the Motor City area looking for the perfect place to start your paddling journey, check out the Motor City Paddle Club.
They have kayak rentals at Weber Paddle Park on the Salt River, a beautiful spot to connect with nature and maybe even spot some wildlife.
It's a great way to make memories that will last a lifetime. So go ahead and plan your own paddle tail.
Visit their website, www.motorcitypaddleclub.com, and get started. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's get back to this podcast concept.
Right, they talk about how each episode should be structured. I think it's worth diving into that a little more.
I agree. The structure's super important for how well they can tell these stories.
So how do they see each episode unfolding?
Well, they really emphasize grabbing the listener's attention from the start, making them feel like they're right there on the water.
Experiencing it alongside the storyteller.
Exactly. They do that with sound.
You mean those ambient sounds we talked about earlier, the
Yeah.
waves, the birds, the river?
Yep, exactly. Those sounds set the scene and establish the mood. Peaceful, exciting, whatever it is, those first few moments really pull you in.
Like you're stepping into a different world, just through sound. And then they get into the main story, the interview.
Right, and that's where the real magic happens. We hear from the people who lived these adventures in their own voices.
We hear about their challenges, their triumphs, those moments of awe, even those laugh-out-loud mishaps.
And it's not just about what happened, it's about the feelings, too.
Like, what was it like to paddle through that fog, not knowing where you're going, or conquering that tough rapid, pushing your limits and coming out on top?
Exactly. Those are the moments that make the stories so relatable, so inspiring.
And of course, we can't forget the paddle fails and wins.
Of course not. That's where listeners can chime in, share their own stories, connect with the community.
It's such a crucial element to the show, building that feeling of camaraderie, sharing the ups and downs of paddling with others who get it.
For sure. But I wonder, how much time are they planning to dedicate to this segment in each episode? They don't give a specific time frame, but they do say it's a core part of the show. They suggest different ways to do it, like having listeners call in live or share pre-recorded stories.
So it sounds like they're flexible, willing to experiment.
Exactly.
That's great. Shows they're really thinking about how to keep listeners involved. But we can't forget those amazing episode ideas they've come up with. I'm still stuck on wildlife wonders.
Oh, yeah. Imagine those stories. Encounters with dolphins, whales, otters, maybe even a bear or two.
It'd be perfect for experienced paddlers and anyone interested in nature.
And for those who want a little more excitement, there's Stormy Seas, stories from paddlers who faced the full force of nature and came out the other side.
Wow, that sounds incredible.
Talk about gripping narratives.
And who could resist bucket list adventures?
Oh, I love that one.
Stories from people who've paddled in those dream destinations. I can already picture myself paddling with penguins in Antarctica.
The possibilities are truly limitless. That's what's so exciting about Paddle Tales. It has the power to transport listeners, introduce them to amazing people, and awaken that sense of adventure within them.
It's like a passport to paddling adventures all through your headphones. And it reminds us that adventure isn't always about those far-off places.
Sometimes the best experiences are right in our own backyard.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the Motor City Paddle Club, a fantastic resource for anyone in the Detroit area.
Absolutely. Whether you're a seasoned paddler or a complete beginner, they offer a great way to experience the joys of paddling on the Salt River.
And with their kayak rentals at Weber Paddle Park, it's easy to get out on the water and start creating your own paddle tails.
You got it.
Speaking of creating paddle tails, what are your thoughts on how the podcast plans to encourage listener participation and make the audience feel like part of the show?
Well, we've already talked about paddle fails and wins, but they also mentioned things like listener polls.
Oh, like what?
People could vote on their favorite paddling destinations or weigh in on different topics.
That's a great way to keep them engaged and give them a voice. And I love that idea about audio clip submissions.
Me too.
Listeners could send in recordings of their own paddling experiences.
Imagine that.
It'd be like a virtual campfire gathering where everyone shares stories and connects over their shared love of paddling.
I can already picture it. The crackling fire, the gentle sounds of water, and the voices of paddlers from all over the world sharing their adventures.
It'd be incredible. And those interactive elements would really break down the barriers between the podcast and the listener. It would create a sense of community and shared adventure.
Exactly. It all comes back to that central theme, celebrating our connection with water and adventure. Paddle Tales reminds us that every stroke, whether on a peaceful lake or a raging river, has the potential to create those unforgettable experiences.
So as we finish up exploring the paddle tails concept, I'm left with one final thought. What kind of paddling story will you contribute? A story of quiet beauty on a calm lake? Or maybe one about conquering a wild river?
What about a close encounter with nature? You know, those moments that take your breath away?
Or even just a funny mishap, reminding us it's all about having a good time out there.
Exactly. No matter what your story is, I hope you answer the call of the water, find those moments, those connections, those adventures.
And create some paddle tales of your own.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll feature your story right here someday.
That would be awesome.
Now, if you're in the Motor City area and looking to jump into the paddling world, there's a great place to start.
Oh, yeah. Where's that?
The Motor City Paddle Club.
Right, of course.
They rent out kayaks at Weber Paddle Park on the Salt River.
Such a beautiful spot.
Perfect for experiencing the peace of nature. You might even see some wildlife while you're out there.
Always a possibility.
It's a fantastic way to create memories that will last. So why not plan your own paddle tale today?
Head over to www.motorcitypaddleclub.com and start planning your next adventure. And remember, every time you dip that paddle in the water, there's a chance for discovery, connection, and a story worth sharing.
Happy paddling, everyone!